Hi everyone, this is Taylor and this is the Daily Geddon. Today we're going to talk about the latest economic relief package for the coronavirus, and it's specifically targeted at small businesses, and that's because it's a revamp of the Paycheck Protection Program from the CARES Act. Now, if you don't remember what the Paycheck Protection Program was, it was a program that allowed small businesses to apply for loans to cover their payroll, and it was exactly up to 2.5 times their payroll costs for about 5 months. Now that loan, the special thing about it was it's completely forgiven by the government. So it's basically a grant to small businesses to allow them to keep people employed. Very simply put, this bill, which is HR 266, just dumped a bunch of money back into the Paycheck Protection Program. It basically doubled it. It went from $350 billion, which was completely used up, to $650 billion. So there's about $300 billion more dollars for small businesses to go out there and claim. It also doubled the amount of money in EIDL grants, which is Emergency Injury Disaster Loans, and that's just another way for small businesses to get bailed out. However, these loans are not forgiven. Only the loans under the Paycheck Protection Program are forgiven. Another thing this bill does is that it makes sure that medium and small size lenders are giving out a certain portion of this money. $60 billion at a minimum has to be given out by medium and small size lenders, and that's in order to target small businesses, so that large banks aren't giving priority to big customers because they want to grease their pockets and make sure that they have their business in the future. These small lending institutions will be more tied into communities, and they'll be able to lend money to actual small businesses. This bill also appropriates $100 billion to support the healthcare system, and that $100 billion is to be used for things like PPE and testing and development of new tests, development of new medicines to fight COVID-19. Pretty much any way you could possibly fight COVID-19, that money is for that. Now, they line out very specifically what some of that money is used for, but in general, they're trying to help the healthcare system by just giving it more money so they can have more assets and fight this disease. Now, this part's going to be a lot less formal than my normal content, so just bear with me, but I feel like getting into the fine details really shows you a little bit of why I'm doing this and why I'm actually making this video and why I'm making this channel and pretty much everything that I'm doing. And the first thing that I want to talk about is some of the language that's used in both the first CARES Act and this new bill that revamped the Paycheck Protection Program. And the first part of that is when it talks about how it changes section 1102B1 by striking $349 billion to $659 billion. So that's where it's taking the money from the Paycheck Protection Program and just increasing it. That's perfectly fine. I understand that. It makes perfect sense. But the next part says 1107A1 by striking $349 billion and putting in $670,335 million. Now that is interesting because why is this amount different? Now, I went back and looked at the first bill, the CARES Act, and if you go to 1102B, 1102 Section B, which let me get there, this is 1102 Section B, and it talks about commitments for 7A loans. And the language specifically says the amount authorized for commitments for general business loans authorized under Section 7A of the Small Business Act. So that means it's authorized for just general business loans. For any business loan that a small business wants to take out, they can take it out against this money. So that's great. That's awesome. They can take out money. They're giving more money to small businesses. But then it says including loans made under paragraph 36 of such section as added by subsection A shall be $349 billion. So what that tells us is that $349 billion was dedicated to both general small business loans and these loans that are going to be forgiven under this CARES Act. So if we look at a section 1107 and we looked at it's the direct appropriations part of this bill, it talks about that same $349 billion under the heading Small Business Administration Business Loans Program Account CARES Act for the cost of guaranteed loans as authorized under paragraph 36. So no longer is this money available for just general business loans. So that's the question I have is, first of all, who didn't catch it and why aren't these people editing their bills? But not only that, but Is it double the amount that was appropriated? Did we appropriate almost $1 trillion to small business loans? Obviously, that's not what happened, because we only dedicated $350 billion. But one could argue that the language says that we had money set aside for general business loans and guaranteed loans, and then we had money set aside for just guaranteed loans. I know it's getting really nitpicky, but these people are lawyers. Most of our senators are lawyers. They have law degrees. That's what they got into this business for. That's why people elect them. They have experience. And me, with absolutely no law experience, I looked at this thing, read the language, and I mean, there's an argument that could be made for why wasn't $1 trillion, almost $1 trillion, dedicated to the small business loans. I know it's a little bit over the top, but I still just wanted to make the point that there are some inconsistencies in the way that they wrote these bills, and I wouldn't have said anything, but they very specifically said Section 1102B1, striking $349 billion and inserting $659, and then striking $349 billion and adding $670,335. I wouldn't have said anything if they didn't explicitly call out those very two different numbers. It's something that's very obvious, I think. Once again, I know it's super nitpicky, but I think that it's part of the reason that I did this was that we could see these things that Congress is doing and see that, I'm not saying they're not qualified, but maybe they're not doing the job as well as some people thought they were. I know it's just in the back of everyone's mind, oh, government's just doing government stuff. But honestly, we need to be looking at these things and asking questions. And hopefully these videos will help you ask some of those questions. The other part of this bill that I was talking about with the small to medium-sized lenders rules, those rules were put into place because there's a bunch of speculation on whether or not the money was actually appropriated to small businesses. And honestly, there's evidence that it wasn't. Businesses would come out like Shake Shack, and there was another steak business that said that they got money from the Paycheck Protection Program, and some of them gave it back, rightly so, but they got money from the Paycheck Protection Program even though they weren't qualified as small businesses. And what I'm calling for and what I'm talking about is an audit of the $350 billion of taxpayer dollars. That's yours and my money that we're paying for taxes. $350 billion could have just been given away willy-nilly to any corporation that applied for it, or at least it seems that way. There's a story that I pulled up here from Fortune.com, and they wrote an article about misappropriations in the Paycheck Protection Program, and they reference Ashford Hospitality Trust, which applied for 117 different loans under this section and got $76 million. Now, I know that that's not really vetted out information. I don't have a primary source saying that they definitely got $76 million, but that's enough speculation, I think, to at least audit the information and see where all of these loans went to. And the funny thing about that is it would be really easy, because in the original Paycheck Protection Program, not only did they say, first of all, that $10 million was the maximum amount of money you could get from the Paycheck Protection Program, so applying for 117 loans and getting $76 million is ridiculous and obviously a loophole, and it was something I thought was a possibility in the beginning, but I didn't want to be super skeptical. I wanted to think that people would be able to implement this system. But it also says under Part C, where I'm talking about how we're going to track these loans, that the loans have to be registered no later than 15 days after the date of which the loan is made. Under this paragraph, the administration, which is the Small Business Administration, shall register the loan using the TIN, or the Taxpayer Identification Number. So we have a list, or should have a list, of taxpayer identification numbers associated with every loan that was made under this section. Now, whether or not they actually made the list is another question, and that'll reflect poorly on the Small Business Administration, but if they did, they should have no reason not to release this information and show us, because if the money was appropriated correctly, which it wasn't, they wouldn't have any problems showing us, the American people who paid these small businesses, basically, where all of our money went. Any reasonable person that's giving money to some business, an investment, anything, would like to see where their money is going, and a little bit more transparency, especially when the bill specifically calls out for tracking this information is definitely necessary. Now, I know I got a little bit on my high horse, a little bit of a soapbox, but it's something that I feel very passionately about, is transparency in the government. And when you specifically call out something that says that you're going to register all this information and track it, that should be easy information to release to the American people and show us that our taxpayer dollars are actually being used in the right ways. That's all I have for this video. I know it was a little bit different than my normal content because it has a lot of my feelings and thoughts, and I try to stay away from that as much as possible and only talk about what's in the legislation. But I don't think that I'm too off base, and I think that the Paycheck Protection Program was very well intended, and that it was supposed to target small businesses because the government understands that small business is a large part of the American economy and that those businesses can't take a lot of economic disruption. And I think that they were trying to give them money. I really do. But they didn't set up the right rules and regulations to make sure that those businesses were very specifically targeted. And people are ruthless out there, and they'll take what they can get, and they'll find any loophole because people are greedy, unfortunately. Now, I think that the government should go back and audit the information that they have and maybe penalize the companies that took money that shouldn't have, or at least get the money back so that they have enough money for small business loans in the future and we don't run out again. But that's completely on them. All I can do is say go out there and pressure your senators, pressure your congressmen, send them messages on Twitter, let them know how you feel. I hope that you learned something, and as always, like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and thanks for watching.